Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm here with a new friend and guest. Actually, Clint, I hope we're going to be friends. I think we will be.
We can, yeah, let's go there. We
Am
can be
I
friends.
am I putting too much expectation on us?
No, I like it. I mean, we'll see how this goes. We'll see. Ask me that question again at the end of the
Yeah,
podcast.
let's do it
We'll
at the end. Yeah. So Clint is an author of, dare I say, Christian science fiction. Is that an okay description of it, Clint?
Yeah, I think so. Although I actually kind of feel like a lot of my books are fantasy books, kind of disguised as sci-fi books.
Yeah.
But yes, yeah, absolutely. I think that's fair. I mean, and it's interesting when you sign a traditional publishing contract, your publisher kind of chooses your categories, and I could not have more respect for my publisher. So when they say Christian sci-fi, I'm like, sounds good to me.
Yeah. Well, fantasy, I think right now fantasy probably takes the cake for the biggest market share
Mhm.
in fiction, but I have a special place for sci-fi myself. But I definitely see what you mean about fantasy, because having read some of your material, it's one of those kind of mashups. It feels I'm thinking of like riding dinosaurs, for instance,
Yes.
in Echo Nova. I'm like, yeah, that's more of a fantasy feel. Hey, but before we get to that, I'd love for you to just kind of give us a little bit of background. Where'd you grow up? What's your faith background? How'd you get into
Sure.
storytelling, stuff like that?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm born and raised in Atlanta. So my whole life I've been in Atlanta. Kind of grew up on the South Side. Grew up very, very much like the typical sort of what you would consider like the 1980s blue collar family.
Okay.
So it's like the dad came home like sweat. He worked for Delta Airlines. So
Okay.
came home like very much like sweaty from working on airplanes. And my mom was a school teacher. Two kids, just kind of like straight out of the sitcom almost type of a thing.
Yeah.
So I was always a creative kid. The truth is, I really think my whole life I knew I was going to be a writer, and I just kind of had just sort of an innate understanding. And I even, from a very young age, I was doing things like making comic books on the living room floor. And then when I got to middle school, made comic books with my friends, and we actually had an English teacher who would buy them from us, and we would use that to
awesome.
we'd use that to go buy like the slush puppies like at lunchtime or something like that, which was awesome. But it's funny. It's a funny anecdote, but honestly, it's the kind of thing that like for a middle school kid, that can change your life. When you get that sort of validation from
it sets a direction.
Right, in an authority position. So, in terms of my faith story, though, we were kind of the family that sort of went to church like every once in a while. We kind of go through fits and starts, I guess. We'd go for a few weeks and then kind of back off, and then go for a few, and then we'd be there. Usually Christmas and Easter, but not even always then. Yeah. Because Christmas and Easter were also crowded.
Yeah. A little uncomfortable.
But my I obviously love storytelling, but other than obviously faith and family, my other great love in life is basketball. I love basketball so much.
Yeah.
And grew up playing. And when I was in high school, there was a church that I had a few friends at that had a very serious basketball team. Oh. And they invited me to come play.
Okay.
And so, but part of the deal was to play on the basketball team, you had to attend church. I think it was like twice a month or something like that. So I started going to their youth group purely so I could, and again, I would have called myself a Christian, but I started going to that church purely so I could play on the basketball team.
Yeah, right on.
And it changed my life, and that's, I built relationships there like you do. I mean, I get what the ploy is. The ploy is, well, we're going to get these teenagers to come to play basketball, and then we'll get our hooks in them, like they're being nice to them and building them up and sharing Jesus with them. Yeah. And it completely worked. It completely worked on me, and it changed my life. And that's where I wound up. It was in that church that I wound up getting baptized. And, the thing about it too, to give my parents a lot of credit, that it wasn't like, well, he's going to church, so we'll start going to church. They only set foot in that church one time, and it was to see me get baptized.
Wow.
But anytime I wanted to go for youth group or for the basketball practice, they always dropped me off. They were always ready to take me there. So that was great. So but it's interesting though. It definitely affected my perspective, because I came to faith a little bit later in life than a lot of other Christian
Yeah. What
authors that
what
I
age were you
know.
there? Was that
Yeah, so
15, 16, something like
I was 16, I think, when I started going, and maybe 15,
that? Okay.
and then 17 when I wound up getting baptized. But
Yeah.
because of that, I missed so many of what are when I'm at like Realm Makers or something like that with all the other Christian authors. Yeah, I didn't grow up on Veggie Tales. I didn't know what Veggie
Yeah.
Tales was. I didn't read I didn't
Which
read the
the
Narnia
VeggieTales guys
books.
were there this summer.
They
We
were,
actually
yeah,
saw
Mike
them there. Yeah.
Naraki. I've actually gotten to hang out with Mike Naraki a little bit now,
Yeah.
but
Did you tell
I
him you
didn't
had no
read.
idea who he was? Was that like a thing? Sorry, dude, you're not famous to me.
I just left it alone. He was the cucumber, right? Yeah, he was the cucumber.
Yeah.
Anyways, I didn't go through the Narnia books until I was an adult and married.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so all of those things I kind of missed, and even growing up, when I did start going to youth group, like we'd be sitting in youth group, and like, okay, everybody open up to Proverbs, and I
Yeah.
just kind of like look at my buddy, and he would just be like, it's kind of in the middle, because I didn't know where that
Yeah.
stuff was. I was just be
Yeah.
flipping through my Bible, I had no idea where I was going. So it definitely has impacted my perspective, I think, especially now as a faith-based storyteller. Having a little bit of a different upbringing, I think, has certainly shaped the way that I tell stories. Not necessarily intentionally. I don't think about it that way when I'm trying to write stories, but it's something that I just kind of noticed that I do think I'm coming in from a slightly different perspective because of
Yeah.
the way I grew up. Yeah.
Do you think that allows you to reach into the lives of those that maybe are similar, like culturally Christian, but
Maybe.
don't have the experience? Because I mean, like, I grew up as a a youth group kid, and I struggled a little bit to connect with. I was in public
Sure.
school though, and I struggled a little bit
Yeah.
to connect with the public school kids.
Right.
Like, do you think that sets you up to do something unique when you're writing and kind of producing content that way?
Maybe. I think it does. I have always been outreach minded,
Okay.
because I'm a product of. I view myself as a product of outreach. Again, I started going to church because they had a cool basketball team that I
Yeah.
wanted to
Yeah.
play on. That's
Yeah.
outreach. So, but again, it's not. So yes, perhaps, although it's not necessarily something that I don't think about. This is kind of a weird thing to say, but I don't think about my readers at all when I'm writing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really just try to think about the story and the best story that I can tell and that I'm trying to tell, and
Yeah.
whatever I think is cool. Now, I mean, we can't help but be something of a product of our own experiences. Now, that doesn't mean we necessarily have to be a victim of our own experiences. We can do certain things to then, it's like, hey, I grew up this way. I wish I would have grown up that way, or whatever. We can
Yeah.
take steps to sort of to reshape ourselves. But I do think, does it? I suppose so.
Yeah.
And I'm honestly, I'm not always sure for the better, because there's a lot of things too where when you write, you get very internal.
Yeah.
And sometimes you start digging up stuff and you're like, oh, I didn't realize that was there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Little quotes come out that you don't intend.
Sure. Yeah. So, and honestly, too, it was, I was very grateful to be, with Enclave, which is a Christian sci-fi fantasy publisher, because I like the idea of knowing that I have other believers that almost are serving as sort of a filter, right? Nothing that I'm putting out there, they're like, hey, are you sure you want to say this to people?
Yeah.
And I got to give them a lot of credit too. There's been a couple things, especially like in Steel Fire, that I was like, boy, we'll see if they're cool with this. But they were, and I was actually surprised at the things that sort of did not get flagged. And I believe it's because of the way in which those story elements are presented. So
Yeah. There's a lot of latitude when it's part of the story build, or it's part of the character arc, or
Right.
there's latitude there where you wouldn't get that if you were writing straight like Bible study curriculum. It's like, that's a no-go. But because your readers will encounter that in the real world, it actually is valuable to reference those types of things. So like in Echo Nova, which I reviewed a year or so ago, there was a strong theme of of kind of like this, I don't know. I think I saw another reviewer say a self-indulgent digital culture kind of a thing.
Oh
And
yeah,
that
yeah.
felt very commentary on, it felt, like commentary on what we're wrestling with right now. Is that type of thing intentional, or is that just sort of like, it's where you're living and so it's what's coming out?
It's kind of both. Echo Nova, I think for me was so the way that I've kind of framed my career, and this was not intentional, but the way that in retrospect, I'm sort of almost framing my career so far. And I mean, yeah, my third book hasn't even come out yet, but um, my first book, my first book was for me, Steelfire. Steelfire is ultimately about a character going through a crisis of faith.
Oh,
My second book was more for my sons, even though when I wrote it, my sons weren't even born yet.
okay.
When I wrote the first draft, at least, but it's because it was something that I was going through, which was very much a feeling that you need that our worth is defined by our achievement and our
Yes.
notoriety.
Yeah, that was definitely there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I do think that the digitally obsessed culture is very intertwined with that. A lot of things that it's like kids are just on their phone all the time, but a lot of it is because so much of it is designed to that their self-worth is dependent upon those interactions,
Yeah,
right? Like
sure.
how many people are liking this, how many people are following me, how are people
Absolutely.
engaging with
Yeah.
this, and that was something that certainly came through in Echo Nova, and I think I was feeling it. I think that at that point I had been writing books for several years, with tons of just piling up rejections.
Yeah.
And I do think that book, there was a lot of things about that book. For one thing, I had been working on another, my trilogy that's coming out here pretty soon.
Yeah.
I had been working on that for a very long time. It's very in depth, a ton of characters, very involved. And after I finished working on book 2 of that, I was like, I need something that's fast, fun, and just simple. And that
Yeah.
was Echo Nova.
Yeah.
So that was part of why Echo Nova is the way that it is. But also part of it, though, was I think me wrestling with understanding that your sense of worth is not based on achievement. It's not based on notoriety. Because that's what Dash believes at the beginning. He's
Yeah.
like, look, if I'm going to make anything in my life, I got to be something. And
Yeah.
being something means being something to other people.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
and
do
largely
think
people
that'll,
that don't know him directly. I mean,
right,
it's more of an
right.
audience rather than it's fans rather than family.
Absolutely.
It's that sense of like that distant, isolated crowd, which we're
Absolutely.
wrestling with. I mean, we're dealing with that constantly, not just as a writer, I'm sure, but just as a human. I mean, I think everybody is kind of
Sure.
wrestling with that weird tension that we're living in. Uh,
It's,
Fast is a good
it's,
word
it's
for it
tough.
too, by the way. Dash
Mm.
Dash is the name of the main character. He is
Yep.
fast. He's literally,
Yep.
you guys need to go read it so you know in what way he's fast. But that's actually a good description for it. If you want something that's I'm talking to the audience now, I guess, but you're
Yeah.
looking for something that's just kind of a fun low. It's a high stakes story, but low stakes read. I mean, you can jump into
Sure.
it. It's not part of a series, as far as I know. It's not a series, is it?
No, Echo Nova is a standalone novel.
Yeah.
Although, if I know what the next book would be, I
Yeah.
think. Um,
Yeah,
and even I don't even.
there's
There's a
plenty to
lot left
go
on the bone.
from. Yeah,
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 there is. There is.
yeah,
And I don't know. Obviously, I know a couple things of what the next book would be, and it may not necessarily be a sequel.
yeah,
I'll just leave it at that. Right.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. Very cool. Well, hey, speaking of the work that you're doing in the fiction realm,
Mhm.
from what I understand, reading through your bio, you write other things, but that's not really what we're focusing on today. So we're mostly focusing on your fiction work. So as far as your fiction goes, the way that I've been sort of wrestling with this for a little while, that people, when they use the term "I'm a Christian writer," that adjective Christian means a range of different things, and I've tried
Yeah.
to kind of codify what is it that people mean, and it's kind of a spectrum. So so on the one end, it just means it's clean, it's family friendly.
Sure.
A second point on the spectrum might be it's informed from a Christian worldview, but it's not there's no I'll say overt Christian messaging.
Right.
Another approach on that spectrum would be Christian characters who
Mm.
speak the messaging, but it's almost like the narrator is impartial, but the characters care. And then there's overt Christian messaging. And then I think on the far end of the spectrum would be like biblical allegory or parable, like long form parable. So I don't know, where do you, as far as the books you've published so far, where do you put yourself kind of in that lineup?
Yeah, and I'm stealing from Steve Lobby when I say this. Because obviously it makes sense that he would have thought more about sort of the question you're asking than I have. So when I heard him put it this way, I was like, yeah, that's it. When people ask what makes an Enclave book Christian, he would say it's the authors that do, right?
Yeah.
So, which is sort of, and I think it was kind of to your second like notch on the spectrum or whatever the right word is that I should say.
Yeah.
Which is that it's really about the worldview of the author, right? The beliefs of the author that make them Christian or not. Now, that being said, this is actually a really interesting discussion because you are making certain promises to the reader of here's what you're going to get, here's not what you're going to get, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And Enclave certainly does that, right? They have certain standards and practices. And I do like to joke. It's like, I thought I was compliant with Enclave standards and practices. And then I got my edits back and they were like, you can't do this part. You can't do this. And it was honestly, it was funny. Like it was good. I was like, yeah, you're right. Okay. I'll take that out. Whatever.
Yeah.
However, and I actually agree with that. And I agree too, that there's a certain, when people who are familiar with Enclave, when they see that logo on a book, there's kind of a promise that's been made to them. Here's what this is going to have. Here's what this is not going to have. Yeah. I do think that there is room in the market, though, for outside of those boundaries a little bit, and it's tricky because you certainly don't want to hide your faith from anyone. But like I'm reading the Old Testament right now, and I'm like, wow. Yeah. This part, some of this stuff would never
it's raw.
Okay in one of these books, right?
Yeah.
Because and you even mentioned like Christian allegories. I'm like, well, some of those that spectrum is almost like a circle if you go far enough. Because
that's an interesting point. Yeah.
Because I'm
maybe more like a color wheel or something.
I guess I don't know, but because so I do think that there's room for more. Because this is a question. I mean. When I was growing up, it was all about what makes a band a Christian band.
Yeah, I don't know. Same issue. Yeah,
right. Because people was like, so I'm in my early 40s. So like Creed was big when I was young.
Yeah,
it was like,
me too.
Is Creed a Christian band? And it was like this constant debate. And we'd go to big conferences and people were talking about this like on stage. Like, is it okay for us to listen to Creed? And it was always this funny thing is like whatever band you liked, you were trying to convince yourself that they were a Christian band. Like obviously we're not a Christian band. And I don't know. It's definitely hard to place that label on and to know like if you ask three people, if you ask three Christians that question, you're probably going to get four different answers.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, but I would tend towards simply saying it's the viewpoint of the author.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious as to what you think about this, though. Do you think that Christian fiction, and all my Christian fiction is what people would consider clean, but do you think it all should be clean? Do you think it all has to be clean?
Yeah, I'm not so concerned about the cleanness of it, but I think it is well, I've proposed before that I think we ought to have some sort of tagging system so that we can let readers know, because really what we're really dealing with is the parental issue. So you mentioned Creed, and Creed is a good example. So I grew up in a youth group, and my mom did not want us listening to a categorically secular music. And so Creed was marketing. So it's just a market issue. It's like Creed was marketing to us in a way that like Stone Temple Pilots couldn't, or
Sure.
some other
Sure.
90s rock band.
Also a great band.
Yeah, and turns out, yeah, absolutely. Turns out,
I got to meet the DeLeo
did
brothers
you
one time,
really? Oh
actually.
man.
Yeah. Well, I was in a band that opened for not Stone Temple Pilots, but the DeLeo brothers were in another band, like a
Oh,
super group thing, and I got to open for them. They
oh
were awesome.
man. Oh, we
They
got
were
to talk
great.
music then too.
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
awesome. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I don't think it has to be clean. I tell you, I'm reading. There's a writer named Daniel Gibbs,
Mm,
who writes this great like military space. I don't know if you'd call it space opera exactly, but
mm.
well, he probably would. But anyway, it's got a lot of religious overtones, but
Yeah.
the characters use language that would make it might make it PG-13, something like
Sure.
that.
Sure.
But the characters are wrestling with issues of faith. They're
Yeah.
they're religious, and there's a rabbi on board. There's also Christians. There's also Muslims. So it's just, and so he's touching a part of the market that I don't know. Name some other very Christian like curriculum writer they're just
Yep.
not touching that part of the market. And so
Right.
what I've noticed, just kind of following your social media stuff. I don't get on social media much, but I checked recently just because I thought, well, we're going to be talking. Let's see what you're doing. And I
Sure.
noticed you're at, let's see, are you doing the May Phoenix fan?
I did it last year.
Was that last
And
year? Okay.
yeah, I'm skipping this year. I'm hoping that I'll actually be back next year. But
Right on. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Well, so that's an example. Like if you were writing Bible study curriculum, you're not going to get a spot at,
probably
Fan
not.
Fusion or whatever
Probably
whatever
not.
it's
Probably not.
called,
Yeah. Right.
So it opens you guys up to connecting. It's the basketball team. Let's use that as the metaphor. It's a
Okay.
type of basketball team, like you said. It potentially brings people in, and I think of it as like the C.S. Lewis or the George MacDonald approach, or
Sure.
the Chesterton approach, where they wrote fiction and people
Yeah.
came and they connected with their fiction, but they also had this body of work that was like in the backlog almost. No, you almost didn't
Sure.
know about it, but then you go and read it and it's like, oh, these guys really care about the Bible. And so I
Right.
suspect that's probably where a lot of kind of on ramping into the faith has happened, is not in the fiction parts, but in the just in the fact that as you learn about the author you like,
Yeah.
there's some connection. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm with you. I love what Enclave's doing. I read Enclave books, and but I read outside of that too. I mean, like I'm also reading secular authors, so it
Sure.
doesn't hurt me, and I'm okay with that. So, some folks are sensitive about it though. So, I know there's a
And
different range.
it takes self-aware. Actually, I want to come back to this point here in a second. I do want to say something about the conventions, because what I want to make sure that I am clear about, though, and I say this a lot, I go to plenty of secular, what people would say secular conventions, where I'm fairly certain I'm the only faith-based. I won't say that I'm
Yeah.
the only Christian there, but I'm fairly certain I'm the only faith-based author there.
Yeah.
I never feel like I have to hide my faith there,
Good.
ever.
Good.
And I actually have had, and I have friends there who are pagans. I have friends that I'm sure, I think some of them might call themselves Wiccans. I'm not positive
Yeah.
about that, but these are people that I'm engaging with, and I'm having great conversations with. I really am.
Yeah.
And honestly, conversations about faith. I didn't really know what it meant to be a pagan until I sat and asked one, and I found out, I was like, oh, I had no idea. What I learned is they're like, it kind of changes depending on who you ask.
Yeah.
I never feel like I have to hide my faith. They all know exactly what I believe.
Yeah.
But I really try to meet people where they are, and I try to lead just with love and with kindness. And I will say that I've never felt shunned. I've never felt, like not accepted by anybody. It's never really been kind of a thing. I go to Dragon Con every year, and it's kind of the same thing. I'm surrounded by all types of people from all different walks of life, and I say that because I think sometimes faith-based authors might be a little bit worried about showing who they are at those types of conferences.
Yeah.
And you may catch one or two strays, maybe,
Yeah.
in terms of like somebody taking a shot at what you believe. But for the most part, it's always fine. If
Yeah.
you're kind to other people, and if you're showing respect to other people, and And honestly, if you're loving the way that Jesus shows us how to love in the Gospels, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's all going to be fine.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
go ahead. Were
absolutely.
you going
And
to say something?
I
Yeah.
think, well, I was just gonna say, I think what occurs to me is that like there's a place for all of it in the market.
Mm,
There is a place for the what we might call worldview
yeah.
Christian. There's a place for just the clean, but it's just a good story. There's a
Yeah.
place for the allegory, and it's not a.
Sure.
I don't read allegory because I know the ending. It bothers me. I don't
Yeah.
want to
Right.
know. I
Yeah.
know where it's headed.
Right.
And the overt Christian messaging stories, I don't always pick those up, but it doesn't mean. But for younger readers, sometimes parents want their kids to do those, and so
Sure.
I know there's a place for each of those. And so I think one thing that would kind of worry me is like if authors felt like they had to apologize to those who expect an overt messaging story.
Right.
You got to
Right.
apologize to them, but then if you felt like you had to apologize when you're at that Dragon Con, well, that's a problem too. And so
Right.
it's almost like maybe part of being the age we are is just being able to say what we are. It's like, no, this is just who I
Yep.
am, and this is what I do, and that's okay. We don't have to apologize for it.
I think that's exactly right, and I would almost take it even further to. And part of me thinks that maybe this is just easier as you get older because, like,
Yeah,
just sort of the way that God designed us, it's like when we're younger, we kind of have to be more accepted because you're trying to build like community and you need to try to build a family and all those
yeah,
kind of things. And
yeah.
then as you get older, you just don't have to be as worried about what people
That's a
think
good.
about you
I
anymore.
could see that. Well, I've wondered, if you think about like in Scripture, it talks about elders. It doesn't
Yep.
say a specific age, but like the
Yeah.
requirements for elders kind of put them as a little bit older. And one of the things that you see with people as they grow is they become less agreeable.
Yeah.
Just you get. I don't know if it's crotchety or what, but you get more set in your ways. And we think of that as like a
Yeah.
negative. But when you're trying to lead an organization of people that are broken and hurting, you
Sure.
actually need people with strong opinions, and you need those opinions to kind of like butt heads and work
Yeah.
through what should we do. And I think it adds strength as we age that we can just be like that. We don't need to apologize for who we are, and
Well,
we know what we're trying to do.
and especially with when it comes to writing, I think it's really important for you to just write the story that is unique to you,
Yeah,
wherever that falls, sort of on the spectrum that we've talked about in terms of if it's more allegory, if it's rougher around the edges, but maybe that's the story that you're supposed to write, and that's you're not beholden to anyone really except God.
yeah,
Okay,
that's
you don't
good.
have to apologize to anyone else. Now, that's hard because you're like, okay, yeah, but I want to sell some books. I want to like make
Yeah,
some money, and I get that. And so I'm not trying to tell anybody their business, but it was very freeing for me when I kind of started reaching a point where I was like, I just want to write stories that I think are awesome, that I really
yeah,
like, that feel personal to me. If people like them, great. And of course, I hope people like my stories. But if they don't, that's okay too, right? Like if
yeah,
I just get to write stories that I think are cool, and then I just do my thing as a dad, and I work a day job and all this, I'm okay with that. That's great.
yeah.
That's perfectly fine. But it can be tough to get to that point. And I think Echo Nova was me trying to get to that point
Mm.
because especially when I first started Echo Nova, I think I was still the opposite. I was like, no, I've got to go conquer the world,
Yeah, yeah,
and I don't
yeah,
necessarily feel that way anymore.
yeah. Well, yeah, it changes over time. I read this thing years ago that helped me kind of relax on that front a little bit. It was that just because, I mean, like the amount of people personally is going to be a fairly small amount, and
Sure.
it's very possible that your interests in what you write does means that the folks are not necessarily the target market. Like my grandma
Right.
doesn't want to know about orbital mechanics and inertial
Right.
dampening. They don't.
Right.
She's not going to care about that.
Yeah.
So what he encouraged was think of it as there is an audience out there, and we are much more capable of finding them now because of the internet. But
Yeah.
you won't necessarily see them in your own circle. Even
Right.
your own, like the first few projects you do, your beta readers. It might even be hard to find beta readers that fit
Right.
that target
Right.
market. But you keep working, and you'll find those people that care,
Yes.
and it just comes. So one of the things I wrote down that I wanted to ask you is, so you've got you've got 2 books published with Enclave so far, and a
Yep.
third on its way. But actually, it sounds more like a third as part of a trilogy. So it's sounding like it's going to be
Yes.
5 at
Yes.
some point. I'm
Yeah.
wondering, what would you say? Like, if you had to boil down kind of the messaging for each of those, like what you want like now that it's written, like while you're writing, you said you don't think much about the reader, but now
Mhm.
as a product that lives in the marketplace, what do
Yeah.
you want the experience to be? What do you want the message to be? What do you want the reader to take away from each of those books?
And even that, because you kind of you phrased that a few different ways there at the end, but I would almost answer each one a little bit differently. I mean, so okay, we're kind of getting into awards season now, and I've been doing the writing contest thing for years. And there was one of the very first times I was in like an unpublished writers contest, and I was a finalist, and like we went to the big thing, and my wife bought a new dress, and it was all fun, and then I lost. By the way, I've never I've
The
never
dress
won
was
any.
nice.
The dress was great. We had a great time. I've never won anything. I'm very, very good at sitting and clapping. But that was still early. That was one of my first ones, and I was bummed. We went back to the hotel room, and I just remember I didn't have any like books with me at the time, and I just like picked up my phone and I was reading Ready Player One on my phone. And Ready Player One just took my mind off the fact that I felt like I had. Of course, I didn't let everybody down, but I felt like I let everybody down. Right? Ready Player One took my mind off of it for a while, and that was fantastic.
Yeah.
If I just give people that, sometimes that's all you have to do.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
That's great. That's good enough, right? Just to say, hey, just enjoy this for a little while, and you don't have to worry about the other things that you're sort of disappointed about. If that's all people take, just a cool story that they enjoy, great. The huge win. Now, to go deeper though, and I have a different answer for each one. So like I said, so Steel Fire was the book that was for me. Echo Nova is the book that's kind of for my sons. Worlds Collide, which is my upcoming trilogy, that's the thing that I want to say to the world.
Yeah.
But I'll start at the beginning. So Steel Fire, it's weird for me to kind of even go back in my head now thinking about it, but that's about a character. It's about robots doing magic, but that's not really what the story is.
I actually have robots with magic written under
robots
the
with
description.
Yeah.
I love that.
But that's not really what the story's about. The story's about a character undergoing a crisis of faith. His family is the family that did everything the right way. They prayed, they served, they fought against the bad guys, they did all the things they were supposed to do, and then they got absolutely annihilated. And they got annihilated by an army that, from their perspective, is sort of wielding the powers of God, because the machines figure out how to do elemental magic. And he's the only guy that's left. And my main character, Gunnar Graves, is the only guy that's left. And he's like, he still believes. He kind of wishes that he didn't believe in God anymore, but he still believes. And he's like, I know I'm not perfect, but I don't think we deserved this.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us have felt that way before. It's one thing when your life maybe takes a downturn and you can point at a decision that you made, or maybe even a series of decisions that you made, and you're like, well, this is kind of my fault because I did this, that, and the other thing, and I should have known.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't go that way. Sometimes there's something bad that happens. And again, you don't think that you're perfect, but you're also like, I don't know if I deserved this. This doesn't seem fair. And trying to keep hope, even in those sorts of times, and understanding that even though, and people can get into a lot of theological conversations about, like does God orchestrate everything, or does he just let things happen? But then turns it, personally, I'm a little bit more on like, hey, God, I don't think God did this to you, but that doesn't mean that he can't use it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And what's interesting though, the key message of that book is that sometimes our deepest wounds and our darkest like shames can become our greatest sources of strength, especially when we use them to help someone else.
Yeah.
And that really, again, that was not intentional when I started writing the book, but that really became the key message of that book. And what I realized too, and you kind of start thinking about it this way, and then you sort of start seeing these stories, is that God may not have caused that terrible thing to happen, but he can use it.
Yeah.
And when he does, there's actually two blessings. There's whatever he does, the blessing that comes from it, right? So this is Joseph, you know, basically becoming in control over Egypt after getting sold into slavery and then thrown
Yeah.
in prison wrong, and all these things that happened to him wrongfully. I don't think God did those things to him, but he used all those things to then put Joseph in this amazing position.
Yeah.
There's the blessing itself, but maybe the greater blessing is when you realize that this couldn't have happened outside of God's intervention. Like this amazing
Yeah.
thing that has come from this. And that awareness, I think, is actually the greater blessing, you know?
That's cool.
Like
Yeah.
there's the good thing that happened to you, but even greater though is realizing that we have a loving Father that will do things like that. Now, so that's
the blessing of belief. Yeah, it
the
changes what you
that's
believe about
perfect.
God. Yeah,
Perfect way
Yeah.
to say it. The blessing of belief.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Now, Echo Nova is a little bit lighter. You know, if I have a like, if somebody's like comes to me and says, "Dude, I just want to take my mind off my problems for a little while," I'm handing them Echo Nova.
Yeah.
Echo Nova is actually very much about empathy, and it's also a lot about our culture's obsession with fame, and how much it sort of desensitizes people. That the people that we see on screens kind of almost become like not real people to us.
Yeah.
Because we just viewed them as a source of entertainment. You know, when I was working on that book, and this was a total fluke. I wrote that book years and years ago. There was a documentary on ESPN. It was like an 8-hour O.J. Simpson documentary.
Wow.
And by the way, fantastic documentary.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
sure.
cut a minute. 8 hours long. I wouldn't cut a minute of it. It was so good.
Yeah.
But when he's fleeing the police, he was driving like 35 miles an hour. And he's in the white Bronco. And there's all sorts of news coverage, or helicopters and news cameras everywhere.
Yeah.
And people are running out onto the streets and on the overpasses, and they're holding up these signs like "Run, OJ, run!" And they're kind of like laughing and joking and "Look at us, we're on TV."
Yeah.
And I'm watching that in the documentary, and I'm thinking, like, this guy, this is an extreme. I won't go into all the details because I don't know who's listening. But people who know this was a very grave and serious situation from a couple of different angles. And something very, very horrible could have happened at any moment during that chase. And almost did. But people, it's like it wasn't real to them. It's like the whole thing was a joke. It was like it was entertainment, right?
Yeah.
And I really got involved with that idea. So it just, for people who haven't, people who don't know, Echo Nova, essentially, it takes place in the future. Time travel has almost become sort of commonplace. It's very, very expensive. But what people do is they go to the past, and there are shows essentially that are broadcast from the past. So you might send back some of our great athletes to like battle against ancient Roman gladiators, or you might send back comedians to infiltrate fancy Victorian parties or something like that. But what they decide, that because of the way, and I won't go into the whole way that the time travel works, but basically that changes to the past don't impact the present. And the reason why is because I have two principles in the books. The speed of time is constant, which means that us in the present, by the time the ripples of change from time move forward, that we've already moved on, right? So if you think of us in the present as at the tip of a stream of water, we are constantly moving forward as it trickles down the sidewalk. So as you go back through time, you change something, that change does create ripples, but the speed of those ripples is constant as well. So by the time it reaches, by the time 1985 reaches 2005, the people who are in 2005 have moved on to 2025, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
which, by the way, since you bring it up, I wanted to say something about this. I put this in my original review, and then there were different versions of the review that got edited down. So I don't remember if I think on the Amazon review I wrote for your book, I mentioned that I think this is I'm not the best read, but I read a fair amount of sci-fi and occasionally time travel stuff. This is unique to me. This was like, it made a lot of sense. Like there is a specific constant in the universe, and it's the speed of light. Yeah. And light and gravity and electromagnetic spectrum and the way that time works is all tied to that. And so it makes sense that there would be a constant at which changes through the timeline would occur. I'd never heard of that, and I'm making it sound like it's some kind of technical astrophysics book. It's not. It's a
You get
fun, like
real
we said, a
simple.
fast,
Yeah.
but there's enough in there. You seeded enough in there where I'm like, I stopped and just kind of like, oh, great idea. And you use
Mm.
this idea of lily pads where it's kind of
Yeah.
like you're jumping from one lily pad to
Right.
another, but the lily pads are kind of like moving through the water because the water's
Which
moving.
makes them not lily pads. And I
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
had
they wouldn't
someone
be
with a
tied,
joke
but
about that.
well, it's
Right.
maybe
Yeah.
they got cut or something,
Sure.
or
Right.
the frogs
Right.
ate the stems. I don't know.
Right.
But beautiful in its ability
Yeah.
to because here's what bugs me. I tend towards like harder sci-fi, and what bugs me in some sci-fi is the author wants some aspect to be true for the sake of the story, but they don't do the
Hmm.
work of figuring out how
Sure.
that could be true with what we know, and so they
Yeah.
just they go soft, and I
Right.
liked yours because it had a note of that kind of hard sci-fi, although I wouldn't call
Mhm.
it hard sci-fi exactly. It's just
No, I'm not
it had
smart enough.
it
I'm
just
not.
had
I'm
a
really not.
note of that, like,
Yeah.
oh, this is thought out. This is well, so very, very creative, very unique. Sorry to interrupt, but
No, no.
it was cool. I liked that. I liked that
I
aspect a lot.
appreciate it. The truth, and people will have asked me a few times, like, how did you come up with that? And the real answer is, I don't really know. It
Yeah,
kind of just sort of hit me one
just
day.
popped out of the ether.
It kind of did. I do a lot of just handwriting, like, especially when I'm
Okay.
world building and doing notes. And sometimes the things will just kind of come out. The
Yeah.
ideas just come out. It's not like I was sitting there trying to think about what am I going to contribute to the genre that I haven't read before. It just sort of happened. But
Yeah.
because those ripples don't impact the present, they sort of decide that the past isn't real, that it's just residual energy, including the people.
Yeah.
And when you decide that people aren't real, that gives you license to do whatever you want to them.
Yeah.
And that's what a
Yeah.
lot of what we see happening in Echo Nova. But when our lead character starts going back and he starts having interactions with these people, they sure feel real to him.
Yeah.
So I won't give away any more spoilers from that, but that's very much what Echo Nova is about empathy for other people, like how we view other people, how I think fame and our desire for notoriety and for achievement can impact our view of ourselves, and how it can also warp how we see other people.
Yeah.
Now, and if that sounds heavy, again, it's also just like a really fun story with dinosaurs and pirates and samurai.
Yeah, like I think if you liked Ready Player One, I think you'd like Echo Nova. It has a similar kind of feel. It's not lit RPG or anything, but it has a kind of an overlap in it. The way that you've built it gives you the opportunity to kind of see those different worlds and stuff like that. But yeah, so I think for readers of that and in that genre would probably really enjoy it. But now worlds collide. I mean, man, this is big. By the way, I wriggled my way onto the street team. For those that don't know what a street team is, he's releasing the book soon. I think it's in pre-order because I pre-ordered it. But
it's in pre-order. Yep.
But if you get on the street team, you can read advanced copies and let people know about it, which I guess is kind of part of what we're doing right now. But anyway, so I've started to read it, but I haven't gotten very far into it yet. But I'm starting to get a feel for the different worlds. So what can you tell us? What still needs? I mean, there's probably things that still need to be a secret since nobody's read the whole thing. But
sure.
But yeah, where is it? What's the world build? What's the thought behind it?
Yeah. So the basic story of Worlds Collide is that sort of is in this fictional galaxy. That 10,000 years ago, these 5 cosmic creators, a dragon, a phoenix, a serpent, a lion, and a wolf, they decide to have a contest of the gods. And actually, since I probably have a little bit more time here than I normally do, the truth is, at first they try to fight it out. And I'm actually going to, this might be the first time I've said this publicly.
All right, we're getting a little something exclusive.
Yeah, I'll release this in a different format before the book actually launches. But at first they try to fight it out because they have to decide who's the greatest among the gods, because you got to know who's the greatest, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't go so well. They're all kind of at the brink of destruction. And what they then decide is that actually the greatest test of a god is creation. So they each create their own world, and they set these worlds on a 10,000 year collision course. What that means is that if no planet does anything at all, at the end of the 10,000 years, all 5 planets are going to crash into each other and everybody's going to die. So the only way for you to survive, to protect your people and to win the war for your creator, is to be the last planet standing at the end of the 10,000 years. So it's ultimately just all of these planets trying to destroy each other
Mm.
before they all collide. So Worlds Collide, which is book one, has a character from each world, a different hero from each planet, and they're all very unique in their own ways. And I've never spent so much time developing a story as I did for Worlds Collide. I spent probably half a year world building and planning before I even started writing book one, and then of course I continued to do so as I was. This trilogy is over a decade in the making, for me. Yeah, it's been the story that I've wanted to tell for a long time.
Yeah.
So.
Do you still remember the moment the idea hit you of that initial? Man. What was the kernel? Was it the worlds colliding, or was it the gods? Or
so it was a couple things coming together. I was working on another book that is still yet unpublished. It may forever be unpublished. But the first idea was the multiple creators of different worlds. But I remember exactly where I was. I was sitting. We were living in a townhouse at the time, and I was working on my other book in my basement office. And I kind of had this idea for the multiple worlds, with each with its own creator, and with them being on a collision course. And that was all I had. Around the same time, I've been reading a book that talked about the different types of hero characters, and it was like the cunning hero, the hero with a code, the winsome, right, that kind of thing. And I kind of thought, it's like, that'd be fun to, as a way of trying to see if I can write each of these different 5 hero types, map each one of them to one of these worlds.
Oh, that's cool.
And then have that. I've done that a lot. When I used to be more of a musician, I want to write a song where the guitar just drops out in the verse. I want to see what that's like. And so I would write a song just to try to learn that. I do that a lot with writing too. So Worlds Collide kind of started off in some ways as a writing exercise of me trying to write different hero archetypes. And it's just in a sense grown from there. But the real message behind this book, and I feel like I can say this, and it's kind of obvious once you start to read it. I believe that the enemy seeks to divide us, and that the more sort of isolated we are into our, I hate that I'm about to say it this way, into our own little worlds, the more we can other people, and I use other like as a verb, right? Seeing them as something different, almost as if they're like a different species or something.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened here. These people, they think that obviously everyone on these other planets, that they're evil, that they're monsters, and some of them kind of are. Yeah. but I see that a lot. I see a lot of division. I see a lot of isolation.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when people start coming together, having honest, generous sort of interactions with each other, our feeling starts to change. And you still may not agree with people. You still may not agree with everything they agree with, but a lot of times you can at least sort of see their perspective. And Worlds Collide is about that a lot. Now, again, there are battles to fight, but the battle lines aren't always where we think they are. And maybe where the enemy wants us to think they are. So in Worlds Collide, as these different planets start coming close together, right? By the time book one starts, we're getting close to the collision.
Yeah.
And several of these planets have already been at war, and this is one of the first things you find out. But like, so for example, the Phoenix and the dragons have already been at war for years, and the dragons have already won, and they've enslaved the Phoenix people on their own world. So anyways, I'm trying to like say this. I'm sifting through spoilers.
Yeah, I know.
I'm talking about this, but they start to realize that there's maybe more going on here than they were originally told. I'll leave it at that. So that's sort of the setup for Worlds Collide.
What it makes me think is, as we get segmented, I'm stepping out of fiction world here now, just thinking about how it relates to us. As we get segmented into our own kind of like, I'll say, digital echo chamber worlds.
Sure.
We sort of each create our own lore, our own backstory, our own creation, origin story of why we exist and what we're doing. You see it with political parties, you see it with denominations within the faith, you see it with, and And what happens is like this microscoping effect where you get focused on the minutia of small differences
Yep.
rather than focusing on the vast majority of content of where we're similar, that
Sure.
we came from the same
Sure.
place. But
Sure.
it's almost like we create that backstory for ourselves and our groups and our tribes so that we can continue the fight,
Yeah.
and it makes
Yeah.
me think, you mentioned the enemy. It makes me think, in a perfect world, I don't think that would happen. I think that must be fueled by something.
Sure.
There must be some dynamo behind that's driving and grinding us forward. And
Yeah.
obviously, because I'm a person of faith, I assume that's Satan's work. That's
Sure.
what he's doing.
Sure.
So I don't know. Yeah, that's interesting. See, I hadn't gotten deep enough into it. I somehow missed the original email for the advanced copy, and I was actually emailing Enclave just yesterday. I was like, did I miss this? And apparently I did. So so
Yeah, no, nah.
I'm catching up now. I've just seen the opening scene of the the battle that's going on and stuff like that. But I don't want to spoil anything, and I'm so
Sure.
ignorant of it. I would probably spoil something just by talking about it. So
No, I probably have already even said too much. I don't know. I'm
hey,
trying
well,
to think, because I'm
take
starting
comfort
to do
in
this
knowing that
promotional
very
stuff.
few people
Yeah.
listen to this podcast. So.
I'm sure that's not true. Come on. Yeah.
Yeah, it should be no problem. Well, hey, I thought maybe we could wrap on just kind of zooming out and just talking generally about kind of favorite things. Like you mentioned music, we've mentioned books, things like that. So what are some of your favorite authors? That can be, it could be Christian, it could be non-Christian. Like what's inspired you over the years that
Yeah.
has just kind of fallen into the hopper?
Yeah, I mean, okay, C.S. Lewis is the obvious answer. Although I'm actually, when I say C.S. Lewis, of course I love Narnia, but I'm actually a little bit more into, especially The Great Divorce. I love The Great Divorce so much. I think about that book all the time. I revisit it all the time.
It runs through my head pretty often, especially
Yeah.
the scene of them walking on the grass and it
Yes.
being painful, but also
Yes.
Napoleon pacing in his little apartment in the back end of hell. I mean, it just, wow.
The idea that hell is getting everything you want, basically.
Yeah.
And then as it happens, you become, again, increasingly isolated.
Yeah.
I think about it all the time. So very much C.S. Lewis, but that's almost like a boring answer, right? Like, because it's almost kind of an obvious answer.
Well, I'm not bored by it, but I know.
Right. I love Max Brooks. So I was actually very fortunate to have Max Brooks on my podcast. So Max Brooks wrote World War Z, and he wrote Devolution, Zombie Survival Guide, and a handful of other things. But and what's funny is I don't really share his writing style at all. Most of this stuff, like World War Z, which by the way, anyone who's like zombie fiction fan at all, you must read World War Z. It's weird to pitch it this way, but it is exactly what would happen if there was actually a zombie apocalypse.
See, I've seen the movie, but I hadn't read the book.
Oh man, the movie's fine. It's a perfectly fine zombie movie. The book is completely different. The book is essentially the pitch of the book is that the zombie war is already over, and this guy's been hired by the government to go around the world collecting different perspectives on what happened, because he's supposed to be writing this like global report from like what happened in all these different parts of the world during the zombie war. And he puts it together as this book. So every chapter is a different point of view. And it's incredible. It's so good. And the audiobook's amazing. He got like Mark Hamill is in it. And I think maybe John Bernthal is one of the voices, maybe. And Martin Scorsese does one of the voices. The cast is unbelievable.
Wow.
So anyways, I love that. I mentioned Ready Player One. I love Ready Player One. That book, part of that was right place, right time for me. It was kind of the story that I needed when I needed it. Even though I'm actually, old as I am, I'm actually a little young for most of the references. I was
too, but I got him.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I think I got him.
I still haven't seen War Games, for example, and a lot of the video game references were a little bit before my time, but I love that story. And then of course Red Rising, which for me, Pierce Brown is the writing voice that I kind of, I mean, you need to be who you are, but I'm like, man, I wish I had that writing voice. It's just so
Mm.
good, so poetic, so strong. And then the book that I like to shout out every once in a while, just because not as many people have heard of it, there's a book called Battle Mage by Peter Flannery, which is really cool sword and sorcery, but it's more like accessible than a lot of other stuff. It's not so ridiculously thick that you just get intimidated looking at it. And it's very just like straightforward, high fantasy, demon armies come in. We need to figure out some magic. We need to get some cool weapons, and we need to go fight this demon army. And I love Battle Mage. So for anyone, especially anyone who's maybe, if you're trying to sort of get into fantasy, but a lot of fantasy seems kind of like there's a steep learning curve, or if there's someone that you think would like it but they're not into it yet, Battle Mage is like a really good like first entry into that genre. So people should definitely go check out that book.
Yeah, very good. Okay, I'm going to ask you a high stakes question here,
Okay.
related to this. So I want to preface it by saying I read. I don't know what else to call it other than secular. Like I'm reading The Expanse right now, and
Okay.
it's fantastic. It's rough. So I'm not endorsing it for those that are bothered by, but it is so well written, and I feel like I can learn a lot just about the craft, for instance. So. Andy Weir's another one. I love Andy Weir.
I love Andy Weir.
I don't know what he's doing. I don't know how he does what he does, but I can't put those books down. Okay,
writing voice for him. Yeah,
so
it's his voice.
I mentioned Daniel Gibbs earlier too. I'm reading secular stuff for fun.
Right.
I often feel that I feel a little bit of an aversion to reading Christian sci-fi and fantasy. Although I don't think I felt that. I don't think I felt that with what you've done. I don't remember the experience like of just thinking through it like at the time. But whatever. Sometimes I feel that, and so the high stakes question is: do you read Christian writing recreationally? Because I'm finding that I struggle a little bit. I do, but I struggle a little bit, and sometimes it feels like a chore. So like what do you read in kind of that world, in that realm?
Yeah, it gets a little bit weird once you kind of get into the industry, because some of the things that I'm reading right now, it's like I'll get asked to read something for endorsement. So is that recreational? You know what I mean? But I read Kathy Tyer's new book, Firebreak, which is awesome.
Oh, she's great. See, that's an exception to what I just said.
Right.
I loved, what was the first one in her series? It was Firebird. Oh, man. So good. And so I read that and I thought, because that was one of the first when I was discovering like Enclave. And I was like, oh, man, we are set if everybody's doing what Kathy's doing.
Right.
And then I realized
no one can do what Kathy does.
Yeah, not everybody's doing. But it's not that it's all bad, all but Kathy. It's just that she is such a pro, know. So anyway, that's a great example of a very good one.
I would throw that one out there. And then I tell you, I think Lindsay Llewellyn is really exciting. She her first book
of hers.
So it's YA. I would call it YA dystopian sci-fi. The Chaos Grid, which is fantastic.
I talked to her at Realm Makers. Okay, I haven't read anything of hers yet.
She's awesome. I actually have not read book 2 yet of that duology, which is called The Crier Stone. I haven't read that one yet, but I also did just read, I think I'm allowed to say this, I read her new book, Karabos, for endorsement. Am I pronouncing that right? I think I'm pronouncing that right. And that actually probably skews, it kind of depends on how you want to split the difference. That one might actually skew a little bit more kind of toward fantasy. But I think that she's, this will be her 3rd book, but I think you'd still consider her, like me, kind of a new author. I think she's a really exciting voice in that space. The other person that I want to make sure that I shout out is Stephen Burnett. I read Above the Circle of Earth for endorsement as well. And I tell you, that book, I remember reading that book and thinking, this book is going to have an audience. I think that book is for... Okay, let me put it this way. So when I went to World Fantasy Con, and it was the year that The Martian had come out.
Yeah.
The book, not the movie. And people were raving about The Martian at that con. I remember astronauts up on stage, and they're like, this guy got the math right. He got the science right. Yeah. Now, that's not why I loved that book. I loved that book because of the sense of humor. and it
Yeah.
reminded me of my
It was
friends who
fun.
were like super into, yeah,
Yeah.
it reminded me of my smartest friends and their sense of
Yeah.
humor. And that's why
Yeah.
I loved that book. I think the with like sort of the technical detail of like, this is actually what would happen from a faith-based perspective. I think Stephen Burnett nails that in Above the
Mm.
Circle of Earth. So I think that he's one to watch, and they've announced, I think they're doing more books in that
Yeah, I
series
think
as
so.
well.
Yeah, I think so.
So he's one to keep an eye on as well. If you're into that, it's a little bit more of the adult side of things.
Yeah.
But I think really, really good. But again, to say like, am I reading it for recreation? Those lines start getting blurry again, because
Yeah, when you're
now
working in the industry. Yeah.
right, most of those that I pick up, I'm like, well, I know this person, and half the time it's like for an endorsement or whatever.
Yeah.
So
So maybe the
yeah.
question would be, did it feel recreational when you got done with it? And it sounds
Yeah, it
like
did. Yeah,
it
yeah.
sounds
That's
like,
always that's
and it
always
sounds
the
like you're
good
in the
thing
right
too.
place. I mean, if you're doing it
Sure.
and it's fun, it's not a grind, then man, how could you ask for something better? I mean,
Right.
I feel that
Right.
way about, on a story writing day, because I don't only write stories. I'm doing, sometimes it's curriculum, sometimes it's Bible study stuff. But definitely on a story writing day, it's like, man, the fact that we get to just do this is
It's awesome,
amazing.
right?
It's like, how does this even exist as a job? It's very amazing. But anyway,
Did I leave anybody out? Who do you like? Who are you into right now?
as you were talking, I thought of somebody. Oh, I tell you, Suzanne something did Waters Break. I thought Waters Break
Oh
was so.
no, that's Waters. No,
I feel
that's
embarrassed. I forgot her name. Is it Suzanne
no,
something? See,
that's
I'm mixing her with who wrote Divergent. Here, we'll both Google it. I bet.
no. You're thinking of Sophia. Sophia
Sophia,
Henson.
not
Yeah,
Suzanne.
right. As I was saying, it was on
Yeah,
the tip of my tongue. What
yeah,
Sophia's my good friend. Sophia, here's the Sophia. I'm sorry. Yes, of course. Waters Break.
yeah.
Yeah,
She, and especially like in the first half of that book. So this is another published by Enclave. Enclave is killing it, man. I mean, they're
they
doing
are.
great work. But in
Yeah,
the first half of that book, I felt like I was getting wet. I felt like I was in the water.
yeah,
The
yeah.
language. It was almost like she created an entire linguistic vocabulary
Yep.
for because it's a species of kind of like alien underwater aquatic people, and so she created this, but it was in English. I mean, it's not a different
Yeah.
language, but it just felt like it's like I've just stepped into this different linguistic world, and then they come out onto the land, and it's so dry and scaly. I don't know. I don't know how she did what she did. It was very good.
Yeah.
So
Sophia's
anyway,
awesome.
that was exciting. So it's kind of like this aversion that I used to have to reading Christian fiction. I thought the only thing that existed back in the day was like Francine Rivers basically writing
Right.
Samson and David books,
Right.
and
Right.
then come to find out there's spaceships and
Right.
fantasy stuff and aquatic dwelling people. So Enclave has been, and there's other publishers doing great stuff. I think Enclave
There
is
are.
just kind of the tip of the spear right now. But I mean, am I right? I mean, that's what it feels like to me. But I mean,
I'd say
what other
so.
publishers would you say are doing well?
Yeah, well, so I mean, because you got Enclave, and also especially just saying the sci-fi too. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention like Lauren Smith, of course, and of course Kathy McCrum, who won like Book of the Year last year at Realm Makers. So
Yeah.
Enclave has a lot of great people doing stuff. Candace Kay does cool YA sci-fi. Outside of Enclave, I like what Descendant Publishing is doing, and I know Troy Hooker a little bit. They're doing some. I think they're getting into a little bit more darker type stuff, but they're also doing a little bit of horror. They did what's it called? What's the Inferno book? The book that's based on Dante's Inferno. That's
I hadn't heard of that.
Brian Timothy. Yeah, Brian Timothy Mitchell. I want to make sure I get the name of his book right. Infernal Fall, which I
Okay.
read and enjoyed. Actually, I did the audiobook on that one, which is read by James Rubart. But yeah, Brian Timothy Mitchell's book Infernal Fall is fantastic.
Okay.
And then Descendant is also getting into some of the middle grade stuff.
Oh, okay.
Lindsay Llewellyn, I think, is putting out a middle grade book with them. J.J. Johnson is putting out a middle grade book with them as well. So I like some of the things that I see them doing as well. Yeah. So for people who, because the thing about Enclave is, I mean, it's still small. It's only so many books a year.
Yeah.
And if you don't fall into kind of what they do, there are other publishers that I'm seeing doing some great things, and I would
Yeah.
definitely highlight Descendant as one of those.
Yeah. But you're definitely you dance with who brung you. So
For sure.
everything you've done is with Enclave so far, right?
Everything's with
Yeah.
Enclave, and
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thrilled. I knew it was going to be awesome, and they have far exceeded my expectations.
Yeah.
Every single person who has touched one of my books over there has made it better, and
Yeah.
that includes all the editors, but not just the editors. The interior design is gorgeous. The cover design is awesome. The marketing stuff is fantastic. Like, just everyone over there has.
Yeah. Who did the map? The map that it opens with. I maybe spent 2-3 minutes just looking. It's not like a complicated map, but it's got the creatures and the worlds, and I was like, wow, this is cool.
So glad I get to say the name Jamie Foley. Jamie Foley made the map, and Jamie Foley also has done. She does the interior design. I think she's done all of my books for Enclave. So not only did she make that beautiful map, but she also, anything that looks cool on the page, that's Jamie Foley's work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a neat layout. Just opening it, I'm just giving you my experience here. Even the font used for the title page, I was like, ooh, what's going on here? It kind of has this feel to it. I don't know. It's well done, man.
So
it's good stuff.
So the cover's Kirk DuPont's. Is that what you're talking about? You're talking about the cover and everything?
Well, actually, the cover is great too. I was just in the advanced copy. I was just that first title page that you come to, just the font. I'm trying to think of the cover. The cover is DuPont's did the cover. Let's see.
DuPont's did the cover. They nailed kind of the retro futuristic kind of a feel, but that definitely has kind of an epic vibe to it. That, again, as soon as I saw it, I was just like, this is awesome. I was so thrilled with it. So again, that's
right. I've looked at this, but I don't know why I forgot what the cover was. Has a real sense of movement to it. Kind of like kind of prismatic movement or something like that. I love his work, by the way. I follow him on Art Station or whatever, and
Kirk's the best.
It's actually a good way of telling what's being published, because he does a lot of them, but he's also working with others too. So it's fun to see what he's doing. Hey man, I've taken up over an hour of your time.
I know. I'm sorry. It's my fault. I just keep going.
You're so generous. I love it. This has been fun. So a lot of times on this podcast, we'll talk about, biblical stuff. And so it's fun to kind of stretch our legs a little bit on kind of these. I love sci-fi fantasy stuff, and I think that our listeners do. So we'll find out. If you get a huge bump in book sales, like this week, I want to take credit for that.
Absolutely. Sole credit.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, thanks so much for being on, and maybe we'll do another one of these sometime. Maybe when the next Worlds Collide. Do you have titles for the other World Collide books yet, or is
I do? I don't think I'm allowed to say.
Not allowed to
yet.
say. Okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
So for folks, let's do kind of like the landing pages and stuff. So for folks that want to subscribe to what you're doing. Is it ClintHall.com? I think, is that the best space?
ClintHall.com. Go to ClintHall.com, and it's also easy to find me. I post mostly on Instagram, so just Clint Hall on there. I'm very easy to find. Yep.
And for books, you've got audio. I know you've got audio. Well, you just tell me. Let me stop trying to tell you. You tell me where do you want to direct people for experience in the books in various formats?
Yeah, you can buy my books pretty much anywhere that you buy books online. So Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com. Obviously, the Enclave Publishing Store is a fantastic place to go, and every once in a while they'll do a deal for like signed editions and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The books are Steelfire from the Gods, which is my debut novel, Echo Nova, which is my second book, which is YA time travel, and then my upcoming book, Worlds Collide, releases on July 14th. All of those books are available in hardcover, ebook, and audiobook. And then Steelfire from the Gods is now out in paperback. I don't think the Echo Nova paperback is out quite yet, but it will be at some point pretty soon. So I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about that, but it's no big surprise.
Are they out in digital? Because I remember reading Echo. I read digital. Was it?
Yeah, hardcover, ebook, audiobook. Every Enclave release comes out in those three formats.
They do those three. Okay.
So yep. Actually, I think a few exceptions. There's a few that may come out paperback first, but for the most part, hardbook, ebook,
Yeah.
audiobook. So yeah,
Very cool.
yep,
So pretty
yep.
much you can get it if you just Google any of the words you've heard in this conversation.
That's right.
It'll
You'll
probably
find it.
drive you toward what you need to find. So I highly suggest the ones I've read so far. I highly suggest. I haven't finished the new book, but I'm excited about it. So I'm looking forward to it. Clint Hall, thank you so much for being on, and I guess we will talk another time. Thanks for listening,
Thanks. I
everybody.
really appreciate it.
We'll see
Thank
you
you for
later
having me
on.
on.